Namaste and greetings. I, Shweta Shankar, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI #Web Policy Learning. Today we are gathered here for day 4 of LPPYF Law and Public Policy Youth Fellowship 2.0 cohort. The chair for the program is Professor Vibhuti Patel, visiting distinguished professor at IMPRI, and the fellowship lead advisor and the expert legal hands-on session is Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, visiting senior fellow at IMPRI. The distinguished experts include Advocate Dr. Flavia Agnes, women's rights lawyer and co-founder of Majlis Legal Center, Mumbai. Professor Dr. Sina Paul, professor at Department of Economics and Isha College for Women in Mumbai. Advocate Dr. Albertina Almeida, a lawyer and a human rights activist based in Goa. Dr. Kirti Bolineni, president of Vasavya Mahila Mandali Vijayawada. Dr. Vahida Nainar, an independent researcher and a gender and human rights consultant. Dr. Aqsa Shaikh, associate professor, community medicine, Hamdard Institute of Medical Sciences and Research, New Delhi. Ms. Elsa Mary De Silva, founder of Red Dot Foundation of India and president of Red Dot Foundation based in USA. The conveners for this course are Dr. Simi Mehta, CEO and editorial director at IMPRI, Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, visiting senior fellow at IMPRI, and Dr. Arjun Kumar, director at IMPRI. Welcome everyone to this insightful discussion, and I appreciate your dedication in investing your time, energy, and commitment to gain a profound understanding of the crucial role and intricacies of legal and public policy frameworks. This program aims to empower participants with the ability to grasp the nuances and complexities of legal and public policy paradigms, offering both theoretical insights and practical skills for research. Today, that is 10th December 2023, marks the International Human Rights Day. This day serves as a stark reminder of the pervasiveness of gender-based violence, a global pandemic that shatters lives and impedes progress. LPPYF 2.0 is also a program that is primarily designed to empower young minds to become the torchbearers of fields in human rights and gender-based equality. This fellowship is truly a testament to IMPRI's collective belief in the transformative power of young leaders who hold the key to shaping a more just and equitable world. On this special day, sessions include the topics. There's a special lecture on International Human Rights Day by Dr. Vahida Nainar, a human rights and LGBTQIA plus community in India by Dr. Aqsa Shaikh, and a legal hands-on session 3 on human rights by Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam. To start the session, we invite Professor Vibhuti Patel for her opening chair remarks. Welcome, ma'am, and over to you. I'm sorry, ma'am, you're on mute.
I said, thank you, Shweta, for introducing the course outline and also explaining what all has transpired. You rightly said that we are commemorating 75th anniversary of the UDHR, a milestone document in history of human rights. This revolutionary document cherishes inalienable rights that everyone is entitled to as a human being, regardless of race, color, religion, sex, language, political and other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. The UDHR was announced by the United Nations General Assembly in Paris on 10 December 1948. Today on WhatsApp and Instagram, you must be seeing photograph of Dr. Hansa Mehta along with the members of the committee, which also mainstream gender and mainstream women's concerns in the UDHR, which was earlier known as a Universal Declaration of Man, and from man to human rights, to make that change, these women had played a very important role. Human rights, they set out for the first time fundamental human rights to be universally protected, and that is the nation states took a pledge to respect and promote UDHR, and is most translated document in the world, and it is accessible in over 500 languages. The first generation of human rights, there were about civil and political rights accepted in 1966. The second generation of human rights include economic, social, and cultural rights. third generation of human rights are called solidarity rights. They were adopted in 1972 and continued the deliberations till 1992, and more refinement and inclusion started happening. And the fourth generation, which we say that it's the right to equally access computing and digital, and the right to digital self-determination, the right to digital security, right to access one's own digital data. That is currently the debate which is going on globally and in our country also. We have come up with so many new laws regarding digital protection and the people, the rights of the people. Now, in 2023, what we have seen globally, the discourse is about the freedom, equality, and justice for all, with special focus on vulnerable groups such as persons with disability, indigenous people, and migrant, because we have seen massive dislocation of communities and millions of people during the pandemic, when pandemic triggered lockdown. In today's world, promise of UDHR of dignity and equality in rights has been under constant battering in recent years, whether it is a Ukraine and Russia war, or currently what is happening in Palestine and Israel. As the world faces challenges, the new and ongoing, like pandemic, climate change, conflict, unforeseen inequalities, morally ruined global financial system, racism, casteism, communalism, ethnic chauvinism, the values and rights enshrined in UDHR provide signposts for our collective action that do not leave anyone behind. UDHR is our conscience keeper. They are valuable for attaining gender just society. Today, we have Dr. Vahida Nainar, who has worked extensively on these issues, and she has been part of several international committees also. We also have Dr. Aqsa Shaikh, who has worked for the rights of LGBTQIA community, and we will have a legal hands-on session 3 by Dr. Shalu Nigam. Over to IMPRI team.
Thank you, ma'am. Now we have a special lecture by Dr. Vahida Nainar. She is an independent researcher and a gender human rights consultant. Welcome, ma'am, and over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm supposed to share screen again. Is right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go.
Yes, it's visible.
Okay. That's visible, right? Okay.
Yes.
So thank you very much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here on the commemoration of the International Human Rights Day today. And I thank Dr. Vibhuti Patel for making me part of these very important lecture series that IMPRI organizes, and also for providing this very useful background of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So today, Vibhuti has presented some of the features of these. What I would like to focus on today is one of the features of universality. And before I do that, I would like to go ahead and just generally summarize the essential features of human rights as we know today. And when I say human rights, I definitely mean the UDHR as a basic document, but also the concept of human rights as a whole. So, so when we talk about the features of human rights as a concept, there are some 5 aspects to it which are very important. One, of course, when you talk about human rights, these are fundamental rights. These are rights that protect basic and essential elements of human existence. And these are basic standards that states aspire to, having acceded to, signed onto the UDHR. The second aspect of feature of human rights is that they are indivisible. What it means is that the whole catalog of human rights, as listed out in the UDHR and the subsequent documents that were that came into force, that Vibhuti, the second generation, third and fourth, the whole catalog of rights enumerated in these conventions must be respected, and they are complementary. Particularly the rights in the UDHR, it's one is as important to enjoy one set of rights. You need to have the other set of rights as well. So they are complementary to each other. They cannot be selectively granted or curtailed, except of course under certain legally defined circumstances, such as a lawful imprisonment, which basically one is deprived of one's liberty. So exception that being, it is indivisible. It is inalienable, which means that human rights are cannot be taken away from anyone. It is inherent in all human beings, and it cannot be taken away on the basis of anything like male, castes, class, gender, sexual orientation, race, nationality, ethnicity, or any other basis. And it is individual. Particularly the UDHR as the origin of this the whole gamut basket of rights is individuals. It's applies to every human being as individual, and protects the individual from any kind of violations by other individuals or collectives. And at the same time, it emphasizes the important role of the collective or a group for an individual. And finally, the rights are universal, which is what I am keen to talk about today. Which means, what does universality means? Universality is that rights are possessed equally by all human beings, merely by the virtue of being human beings. So conceptually, it means that all human beings are of equal worth and deserve the same guarantees and protections of these rights. So universality, broadly, that it means. But going further into what why these rights are universal, because subsequent to these, there are several challenges to universality and saying that these rights cannot be universal. So what are the foundations in terms of why they are universal? There are several human rights theories that propose, social kind of foundations and all of that. But if you combine it, there is a philosophical foundation that kind of explains why the need for these rights to be universal. One is that the foundation to that is that there is fundamental dignity inherent to humans without distinction or exception. And this dignity is every human being embodies that dignity, and it is unearned worth that all humans share equally. And this is the moral basis of human rights, or the human rights regime as we know today. There are experiences of injustices that violate this dignity, which is inherent in every human being. So when there are violations of human rights, it is this inherent worth of human that is violated. And rights, the human rights, are a response to this collective, humanity's collective experience of injustice. So it's a response to the common injustices humanity has seen. For example, when the Human Rights UDHR was adopted, it was a time when when the nation states, the world was coming out of World War II and the horrors that World War II had seen. And, the response that came out, therefore, what can we do to see and show that these violations do not happen again? Similarly, it was a time when around the world there were freedom struggles, freedom from colonialism, imperialism. There were several freedom struggles that were happening around that, and the injustices that happened during colonialism and occupation by several countries in the in the then third world, what used to be called the third world countries, and developing countries. So the rights human rights is a response to that injustice. And all cultures have histories of injustices that give rise to demands for rights. And it is this reason, and this what makes it inevitable, that these set of rights ought to be universal, as it universally applied to everyone, not only to everyone, but in every corner of the world. So that's the philosophical foundation of why rights are universal. But as I mentioned, challenges are there are several challenges to this whole concept of universality. Just give me a minute. 1 second. Oh, I'm sorry.
Ma'am, bottom left.
Yeah, yes, got it. Sorry. Yeah. No, I've just touched something and so so one of the challenges is that human rights as a set of rights are universal. There is a general acceptance of that they are universal, but in abstraction, not in fact. What does that mean? The universal in abstraction, as we stand today, all the countries of the world, 192 countries of the world, have accepted the UDHR. So there is an acceptance, there is a universal acceptance that of human rights and the basic features that it implies and means, embodies. But it is not, there's an argument that it is not actually in fact, or could not really be universal in fact. That its application of human rights compels, or in fact requires, some trade-offs and compromises at national level, which then does not makes it universal. One example one can talk about is what is happening in the name of national security, for example, in different countries. So national security, argument of national security taking precedence over human rights. States, we have seen, violates all forms of human rights on the grounds of threat to national security. There is illegal imprisonment, deprivation of life and liberty, torture, detention for long period of time without trial. All these are severe violations of human rights, and that is so-called accepted on the grounds of threats of national security. So security, despite the fact that providing security is also a human right, security of human beings is also a human right. But when it is a human right, the security, one is talking about security to the people. But what the states does is prioritize security, but it takes security of the abstract state, which takes precedence over rights and dignity of the human people that they are supposed to provide the security for. So that is a big challenge of the universality argument. Second is that human rights is a luxury for developing and poor countries because it hinders development. This argument has been provided by several third world country leaders, particularly in Africa, developing country leaders in Africa and others in the immediate decades following the Human Rights Declaration in the 60s, 70s. Even now, several state governments, what they do in the name of development is crush dissent and so on. So the argument goes that it is only after improvement of economic status brought about by development can a person enjoy personal freedoms of right to life, liberty, and so on, freedom of speech, of press, and so on. That these freedoms value less when there is no economic security. But if you look at the history, what the history shows, particularly the history of the developed countries, it's clearly shows that personal freedom preceded the economic security in some of the most so-called developed societies. It was, for example, the freedom of the poor to vote for the political parties that promised them bread, and to organize trade unions and other kinds of assemblies to defend their rights against the employers, for example. It is what permitted some of these societies to evolve over a period of times. So in other words, it's like development may actually never really occur without basic political freedoms and all. This is not, of course, undermining any other forms of human rights, but that particular argument is also forwarded as a challenge to universality. So what that argument says, it's all very well for developed countries to talk about human rights, but poor developing countries do not have that luxury. Then the third challenge is that human rights is in conflict with Asian Islamic values, or otherwise what is said that of cultural relativism. Cultural relativism position, which means when one talks about Asian Islamic values, that we have our own civilizations, we have our own laws, which may be Islamic laws, or wherever they are, Confucian or Taoism in the Chinese culture, that are as superior to any kind of other system, cultural systems, and they have their own laws which should take priority over any other kind of particularly human rights. And when they are in conflict, that those cultural rights should prevail. But when we talk about cultural relativism in human rights, it is a position according to which any kind of local cultural tradition, regardless whether it is based on religious, political, or legal practices, these are the ones that should or properly determine the existence or the scope of human rights that individuals within their culture or society enjoy. Multiculturalism, which is cultural relativism, which is based on proliferation of multiculturalism, contends that all cultural values must have equal status, and any attempt to uphold mainstream ideology, such as the universality of human rights, is a form of bias or prejudice, and because they do not give their culture equal value. However, what has been seen in history is that states that consider universality of human rights, application of human rights to be cultural imperialism, do not necessarily or substantially respect diversity, cultural diversity within their own countries. Because each country, whether it is Asian values or Islamic countries, within their countries there are, for example, other ethnic minorities, there are other categories of groups, and how do they respect those diverse cultures within that? And there is no history of that kind of respect to cultural diversity within their jurisdictions. So that is another argument. The other is that human rights is an imperialist, colonial Western imposition on the rest of the world. And it is a Western influence that undermines and disrespect other civilizations and rules. So here, this is again a major misrepresentation of history and of facts. Because the Commission on Human Rights, which drafted the UDHR, had an overwhelming majority in the commission was individuals from the developing countries, from Africa, Asia, Latin America, Eastern Europe, and so on. 11 were from these countries, and only 4 were from the Western world. So, and the commission was driven by consensus that human is more important than groups that they belong. And that the human mind and conscience are the most valuable possessions, and any state pressure to influence the independent, exercise of mind and conscience is irreprehensible. And any social groups that a person may belong to may be right or wrong, but that decision of whether they're right or wrong belongs only to the individual person and not necessarily the collective. So so that is the general position. So it is, and in this commission, as Vibhuti pointed out, Hansa Mehta was one of the person who was drafting this commission and contributed significantly to evolving the rights enshrined in the UDHR, and and also to make it, gender neutral, from a bill, it earlier being called from Bill of Rights to Bill of Man to Bill of Human Rights. So these are, factually incorrect position that it's an imperialistic position, and it actually comes from the experiences of injustice that people from the developing third poor countries came out of. So the respect, the right of other civilization, in this argument has in fact led to abandonment of certain individuals under dictatorial or oppressive rule, with no recourse to assistance, support, or intervention from other countries. That is what, this kind of argument of imperialistic imposition of human rights lead to. So the idea is that regardless of where repression is repression, genocide is genocide, famine is famine, tsunami, wherever it comes, is tsunami, no matter that experience of these aspects, whether it's natural disaster or human-made, is universal, regardless of where or in which civilization they occur, and they need that kind of universal response. And the other is that, universal human rights is basically the standard for states to apply. It's UDHR is a document that appeals to the state and not necessarily the societies. So states are required to provide, protect, and promote human rights. And many states do have a series of human rights guaranteed in constitution and in and various laws. But you still see that the universality is still difficult to attain, even in such states where there have been measures taken to, implement the human rights law. Then implications of these challenges of universality. What does it mean? What does these challenges or these arguments in against universal application of human rights imply? One is that there are acceptable reasons for inequality, and that there are acceptable reasons why some human beings should be excluded as holders of human rights. And it is acceptable, meaning to say that in some society, it is even possible or imaginable that some societies would come together, sit, discuss, and decide that certain set of individuals within their societies could be treated differently and be deprived of rights, and that could come out in a free and autonomous decision. That that this kind of scene is imaginable and indeed should be acceptable. So that is one of the implications of these challenges. The other is that it accepts that there is human rights can and indeed should be sacrificed for what is often called the greater good, because development projects or development is also often said that it's important and necessary for greater good. And this often gives dictators or autocratic governments free rein to crush dissent of people, rights of people, and the rights of those who are, affected by development projects, whose rights are impacted, are often indigenous persons who are displaced and severely violated, whose rights, so that it is okay for these rights rights of certain individuals to be prioritized over the rights of who are affected by these individual development projects, or that the culture of religious values trumps human rights, and somehow even if the culture or tradition or religion have aspects to it that are in contradiction, that violates human rights, somehow it is the culture that should prevail over human rights. And that, of course, as we have seen, impacts women's rights severely, as we have seen in several countries, including here in India. It concedes that somehow non-Western countries or non-developing countries, people, living in these countries do not embody inherently any dignity or human values, human rights, and therefore it is okay for human rights to not be applicable to them. So these are what the implications of these arguments that are proposed as challenges to universality actually mean when you talk about it, in the context of society. So so how does this actually the conventions, that of human rights declaration, how do they deal with these challenges in terms of when there's a question of deciding whether a certain nation state have indeed met their obligations under human rights? So the conventions, several is very clear. Whatever the argument that the convention gives is, whatever the economic, cultural, or social conditions exist in a given country, the standard expressed in the convention is a sole guide in deciding if the country has met the requirements of the UDHR or human rights regime, even despite accepting that the mode of implementation may differ from country to country. And the only derogation that is permitted from the rights is if that there is an exception in the convention or the declaration itself. So that's how the convention or the committees that implement these convention look at these challenges. The commonality of humanity of all people trumps or ought to trump cultural, social, and other differences that are existing in the society. In talking about universality in India, how is that viewed? Again, in theory, universality is enshrined in the Constitution. If you look at the chapter on fundamental rights, you can see that the words used that denote that it is universally applicable to everybody is these rights, whether these are right to life, to liberty, to equality before law, equal protection of law, to non-discrimination. All of that is provided to all people, all citizens, everyone. If there are prohibitions on any kinds of behavior that violate rights like discrimination, it states very clearly that nobody can be discriminated. And of course, all those grounds that we talked about is also included in the Constitution. Or nobody can be discriminated on the basis of sex, class, race, caste, and so on. And of course, there are several laws that are being subsequently enacted to give effect to the fundamental rights guaranteed in the Constitution that outlaws tradition and systemic violation, like this STAST Act, the Forest Regulation Act, or the Dowry Act, and so on. So there have been several measures that have been implemented, but in practice, we see that these are far from universal, and the violations that we see of the rights continue to be systemic. So you do have, despite prohibitions on discrimination on the basis of caste, you do have the caste system that maintains hierarchy, and you have several experiences that we see around us of caste-based discrimination, of caste-based violence, and violence based on intersectional identities. Or we still have, despite several advancements made, several rights guaranteed several, subsequent laws being put in place, we still see we still see many cases of unequal treatment of women, upholding of cultural values. For example, the decrees that Khap panchayats regularly pass about women as to what dress code they should wear, whether or not they should carry telephones and the levels of education, all that kind, all the Sharia codes, the kind of the decrees that they pass with regard to rights of Muslim women. So that continues also. Similarly, there are several kind of experiences of injustice by the poor, indigenous minorities that are discriminated against that we have seen. So the practices, despite it having laws that respects the universality of human rights and its implementation, we see that even today, within the country, the practice is far from universal. You see that certain individuals, it's easy, have their rights more respected than others. This whole and the systemic nature of these violence, certain individuals are considered the worth of them as humans is more than the others, and so that experience we continue to have. So, in conclusion, and future of universality, I would like to talk about is universality. As we know, is accepted in abstraction and not in fact or in reality or experiences of people on the ground. Two broad challenges to universality. What it does is it undermines human basic dignity and reinforces hierarchy and the notion that human worth is not equal. It is not equally spread or not equal for all human beings. And lastly, what I would, given that universality continues to remain a challenge in the present day, I believe that success of universality depends on its appeal to human morality. So what does this mean? It appeals to human morality. Moral appeals are basically messages that acknowledges individuals' evaluative beliefs about universal rights and wrongs. So appeals to morality produces a sense of obligation and responsibility because moral are viewed as self-evident facts, particularly by the individual. So appeals to morality on universality is that it calls upon a human person to uphold and respect the dignity inherent in every human being themselves. Each person upholds and respects their dignity inherent in every human being, but also as part of other collective and social groups. But so what does this mean in practice, in reality? This is good as we speak. And what does it mean? It means for each individual to evaluate their own behavior with persons around them, and whether we are respecting the human dignity and rights of another person that we are interacting with. And whether we are and as part of social groups, if we are struggling for a certain set of our rights to be recognized and upheld, are we also looking around around us and look at the other groups struggling for their rights and the extent to which you respect and uphold those rights? For example, if one is part of women's collective that is demanding and struggling for certain rights, are we also understanding and respecting the rights of a woman from the Dalit background, for example, or women who do not necessarily are from other other sexualities, who do not share the same sexuality, have different sexual orientation, or other kinds. How do you uphold, recognize, honor, and value the other person you're interacting with? Similarly, for example, if you have unions and laborers demanding, rightfully demanding labor rights, to the what the appeal to their moral responsibilities, how do they recognize the rights of the woman worker, for example? and the needs of the women's workers and the inherent worth of the woman worker. That has also been, so each struggles while rightfully claiming recognition of their rights and struggling for recognition of their rights and justice. The extent to which one looks at the rights and acknowledges and values the rights inherent in other persons we interact with individually or as part of collective. I think it is this at the level of society that would be in response to enforcing and understanding the universality aspect of human rights as such. And I think I will end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. The session was incredibly informative. You're shedding light on crucial aspects of human rights that are often overlooked. We also got an understanding of complexities and challenges to universality. We are very grateful for the invaluable insights you have shared. Thank you so much, ma'am. Now I request the chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel, to share her remarks.
I think Dr. Vahida Nainar's presentation is so complete that I have nothing more to say, but I think we also need to take a pledge, because after such an important, after 75 years of UDHR, acceptance of UDHR, I think we need to take a pledge to create a global consensus for this implementation, because what Dr. Vahida Nainar said, that yes, 192 countries have accepted UDHR, but when it comes to application in the name of national security, so many countries, not only they are violating the human rights, but they are also actively promoting genocide and ethnic cleansing and torture and all sorts of crimes being allowed, including killing of children and killing and raping and using sexual violence as a weapon. So I think it becomes very important for all of us to work towards creation of a consensus within our own society and globally. So thank you, Dr. Nainar.
Thank you, ma'am. The floor is now open for questions. Participants may raise hands so that we can unmute. Okay. I don't think there are any questions. Yes, Ms. Mitana Shaikh. Hello.
Hello, please unmute and speak.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Nainar, for such a wonderful presentation. I'm just, just a bit curious about how you would explain, I mean, you already have in your presentation, which is to say that the idea of human rights is very much contingent on existing systems of power, systems of oppression, and so on and so forth, and particularly on the idea of the nation state. A lot of our human rights actually emanate from the rights citizens have in a nation state. But on top of that, I'm also wondering, for example, when we think about gender and other sorts of identities and violence and oppression, do you think the idea of human rights is able to capture the multiple dimensions of identity that come into play in causing oppression? For example, like you said, in India, if we talk about gender violence, we also need to think about how, say, caste and gender come together to create those kinds of violences. So if we use the human rights framework, do you think it provides us, even as it has some universal appeal, do you think it provides us with a framework that can be, worked out at a policy level to capture the multiple dimensions of oppression and violence? Sorry, a very elaborate question.
So Smitana, thank you very much for the question. I have to admit, I lost you briefly. So, but I did get you back. I think I do not have a stable connection. But I got your last thing. So I don't know what you mentioned about gender and caste, but I just got the last bit of it, whether human rights provides a framework to have policy to address all forms of oppression. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
See, I personally believe that if you understand if we take the human rights framework as it is, and you understand its basic philosophy table to make the policy, and everybody who is affected to make affected and looking for this policy to address these various levels of oppression, one needs to accept, everybody at the table need to accept that philosophical foundation, which is to say that all human dignity is inherent in all human persons and belief. If you accept that, so whatever is your demand, does that demand whatever to address the oppression that you're facing, that any category of people is facing, what is your demand? If it address your oppression, it's great. You have to address that oppression. That is the basic objective of the policy. But in the demands, are you then, is the solution also becoming a problem, in the sense that is everybody's human worth being respected? Or are we saying that you have to maintain status quo? If there is anything that violates basic principles of human rights, then how do you how can any solution come about if the solution it's discussion than what I'm saying? When you sit at the table, you will find a lot of complexities that come out in addressing this. But if you take the basic premise of it, and particularly and the extent to which they are willing to stand by their own moral responsibility in having the solution. And I believe that there is that reluctance in that part, which is the reason why oppression continues. And therefore, so this is the basic thing. If you say a certain set of system needs to continue because it is somehow caste system and inherited in Hinduism, and therefore it needs to be upheld, then that does not basically sit with the human rights paradigm as such, because so that doesn't sit with the human rights framework at all. So there is whoever comes to the table must all agree with the human rights paradigm to begin with, and the basic premise that human worth is people. So yes, I believe there is a framework within which these can be addressed, but there are several nuances and complications that it would arise that would have to be sat and sorted out. I'm sorry for the taking the time here.
Um,
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We will move on with the next session. We have Dr. Aqsa Shaikh, an associate professor, community medicine, Hamdard Institute of Medical Sciences and Research in New Delhi. Welcome, ma'am, and over to you.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you, Professor Patel and the team and the IMPRI team that they keep inviting me for all the courses, and it's really great to interact with the audience over here. So today we'll be talking about the human rights of the LGBTQIA plus community. We'll be looking at more closely at the rights of the trans, intersex, and queer persons, especially in the contemporary area times, with a lot of court judgments that have come. I'll be using some slides, so let me start sharing the screen. Yeah, can someone confirm if it's visible?
Yes, it is visible.
Yes, thank you. So we were discussing about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and its 75th anniversary. Now, if you look at something which is similar to that in terms of LGBT rights, it is the Yogya Karta principles. So let me just quickly talk about what are those international principles, but just as a reminder, since sometimes we speak of these terms but we forget to revise what do they mean. So just a slide on first the full form of the term LGBTQIA. I know all of you know this. So it's lesbian, gay, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual people, pansexual people, and other sexual orientations and gender identities, which is what the plus sign indicates them. Now, when we are speaking about sexual orientation, it's lesbian, gay, and bisexual people who come in that. When we are looking at gender identity, we have transgender folks. And trans people are those whose gender identity is different from the sex that was assigned to them at birth. We have intersex people whose sexual characteristics are such that they cannot be put into the binaries of a male child or a female child at birth. Then you have asexual people who do not get attracted to person of any sex. Then you have queer or questioning people who defy all these brackets. Now, let's quickly look at some of the milestones in the Declaration of Rights of SOGI, that is sexual orientation and gender identity related rights. And the first thing that came there is Yogya Karta principles. It's called Yogya Karta because it was adopted at the meeting at Yogya Karta, Indonesia in 2006 and then presented in United Nations in 2007. In 2011, we had the Human Rights Council resolution on violence and discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. Then we had the report in the following year. Then we had another resolution 3 years down the line, and then another report. In 2015, we had the first United Nations expert meeting on ending human rights violations against intersex people who, for a very long period of time, were not considered to be part of the LGBT movement. Then in 2016, for the first time, the independent expert on SOGI, that is sexual orientation and gender identity, was appointed, and now we have the third independent expert in place. In 2016, there was a joint call for prohibiting human rights violations against intersex people. And since the sexual characteristic component or the intersex people's rights component also started to get highlighted, the Yogyakarta principles were revised into Yogyakarta principles plus 10 because they came after a gap of 10 years. Now, quickly looking at what are these Yogyakarta principles, these are basically international standards for human rights laws, because different countries have different laws with reference to queer people. Some of these laws punish, for example, homosexuality with death. And in some of the countries, you have marriage equality. Like, for example, Netherlands was the first country to do that. So there are various, you would say, levels of laws, some which penalize and some which liberate. So this was basically looking at harmonization for bringing a standards for human rights laws with reference to sexual orientation and gender identity. And you can say that this is the basic minimum that they have demanded. So these are the rights for providing equality and dignity, and there is a set of 29 principles or rights that it talks about. Then in 2017, 10 years later, the Yogyakarta principles were expanded to include 9 more principles. That's how you got the Yogyakarta principles plus 10. And they further expanded, but we need to understand that these are not binding on the states. They are like a standard or the reference, and they are not binding on the local or the national laws. Though we have seen hundreds of times that the Yogyakarta principles have been cited by various courts, including by the Supreme Court of India, in their various judgments related to queer rights. Now, when it comes to domestic legislations in India, if you look at some of the landmark events in the maybe last 10 years or so, we have the 2014 NALSA versus the Union of India judgment. In 2018, we know that homosexuality got decriminalized with Section 377 being read down. 2019, we got the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act, followed by rules. 1 year down the line, convergent therapy related judgments came from various courts of India. And in 23, we have the National Human Rights Commission advisory on trans people also. Of course, before this, there have been certain setbacks also, but these are some of the positive landmark events, I would say. A look at the NALSA versus the Union of India judgment. Now, we need to understand that historically, queer people have been either considered to be criminals or they have been considered to be medically sick, right? So we had, for example, the Criminal Tribes Act, under which eunuchs were considered to be criminal of, habitual offenders or a criminal tribe, and they could be arrested without having done anything. Then we had, of course, the Section 377 of IPC, which criminalized unnatural sexual offenses, including anal sex, of whatever sexual orientation any person may be. And then you also had the medical diagnosis, which said that homosexuality is a mental illness, transness is a disorder, intersex conditions are disorders of sexual development, and so on. Now, this prior to this, we know that the Delhi High Court had decriminalized homosexuality. Then you had the Kaushal judgment, which again criminalized it. And finally, in 2014, in this 5-bench judgment, unanimously they said that, sorry, this is the Nalsa versus the Union of India judgment, which said that trans people have a right to self-identity. They can self-identify as the third gender. They have a fundamental right to dignity in terms of self-expression or gender expression. It prohibited discrimination on the basis of sex or gender. Important thing to note here is that there is no prohibition of discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation word over here, but sex and gender are included. Recognition as socially and educationally backward class of citizens. So this, I would say, was not a perfect judgment, not very much liked, but something which was appreciated by the community as a landmark judgment. And in 2018, we had the Navtej Johar versus the Union of India judgment, as I was saying, which decriminalized homosexuality through a 5-judge bench. And they read down section 377 to exclude consensual sexual relationship between adults, while retaining it for children, non-consenting adults, and for bestiality. Then in 2019, our parliament passed the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act, which prohibited against discrimination in various aspects like school, employment, healthcare services, residence, and so on. However, the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act was very limited in rules. In the sense that it did not give rights to transgender persons to marry, to have surrogacy or adoption or other reproductive rights. It didn't talk about inheritance, for example. And also the quantum of punishment for sexual abuse or for transphobia was very less, as we'll discuss that further. So I'm just giving you here a comparison, of why we say that we don't have equal rights. When it comes to rape under section 375, for women, if they are raped, then the quantum of punishment is 10 years to life imprisonment, and in some rarest of the rare cases, even capital punishment. When it comes to unnatural sexual offenses under section 377, as I said, that it is still retained when it comes to bestiality or sexual offense against an animal or a non-consenting adult or child, then it's 10 years to life again. When it comes to POCSO or child sexual offenses, of course, you have the quantum of punishment depending upon what is the nature of the sexual offense, whether it's aggravated, whether it's penetrative, and so on. And the quantum of punishment again can go up to life, and in some cases, even capital punishment. When it comes to, however, transgender persons, we know that they're not covered under the rape laws in India because rape laws are not gender neutral. And for an adult trans person who is seeking recourse under the Trans Act, the quantum of punishment is only up to 2 years, right? So that shows that, probably we are treating trans people as not even equal to animals, because for sexual offenses against animals, it's 10 years to life. But when it comes to trans persons, it's just 2 years. So while there are laws present, we need to understand that are we given equality before the law? Now, some more, positive judgments. This came from South, from Kerala High Court and Madras High Court. And they both spoke about transgender persons and their interaction with healthcare, education system, and how the queerphobia, which is present in the medical curriculum, can be extremely harmful. And they gave a sleeve of recommendations and orders to various people and organizations, including the National Medical Commission. And this is when the National Medical Commission revised the MBBS curriculum. I was having this discussion with someone and they were saying me, but haven't the medical textbooks been revised like 10, 15 years back, because the diagnosis changed quite a long time back. The Indian Psychiatric Society, for example, came out with the position statement in 2018. And in US, homosexuality was not considered to be disease since 50 years. But unfortunately, as you can see from this is from September 2022. That's how recent our textbooks have started to change. I'm saying started to change because the old textbooks are still in circulation. The textbooks which say that sodomy, lesbianism are sexual perversions, etc. Then we have the unfortunate thing in our country and everywhere, a lot of places, that's called convergent therapy. Now, convergent therapy is a medical practice which is unscientific, which is inhuman, a form of torture also, where trans people, gay people, queer people, including children, are subjected to certain medical procedures or certain treatments, including shock treatment, to change their sexual orientation and gender identity. Now, you'll be surprised to know that there is no law in India that bans convergent therapy per se, right? But we had some court judgments which said that this is not acceptable, this is inhuman, they have to stop. And the National Medical Commission then said that it is going to be a professional misconduct if any doctor indulges in such a practice. But still, there is no law. And if an adult person says that I want to undergo convergent therapy, then this inhuman practice can be, given to them. Also, when it comes to National Medical Commission, they only regulate allopathic or MBBS doctors. So there is no law which says that under Ayurveda, convergent therapy is not allowed. So then we also had some court judgments on, banning surgeries on intersex children. Now, intersex children, these are children who are born with genitalia which do not fit into our ideas of what's a male child and who is a female child. In Indian birth certificates, for example, in the registration of birth and death act, you have only male child and the female child as the sexes that we have in our country. We don't have intersex present. Then how do you manage a child who has ambiguous genitalia and who can't be put into the box of male or female? And therefore, a lot of parents, families, doctors operated on these children to convert them into either a male child or a female child so that their genitalia looks like, either male or female. Now, these surgical procedures can be harmful to these babies. One is they don't need this for their survival, etc. And secondly, these can be harmful. They can be scarring. They can be life-threatening also. And therefore, the international consensus is that one should not do these surgeries on children because they can't even consent. They don't even understand. They don't even know. Once they are adults, they can do whatever to their bodies in the form of bodily integrity, but not when they're children, and especially when it's not medically indicated. Again, we don't have a law to prevent these kind of surgeries on intersex children. But we had orders, for example, from the Tamil Nadu, from the Madras High Court, very recently from the Kerala High Court, and then also a case is pending in the Delhi High Court. So we see that some of the high courts are taking progressive steps, but when it comes to the parliaments or the state assemblies, they're lagging. Then this is the advisory by NHRC on welfare of transgender persons, which talked about some rights of trans people, which they derive from the Trans Act and also in healthcare. But what is very saddening is that the NHRC does not speak on the LGB or the other queer identities. They're only restricting themselves to transgender persons. And that feels like injustice, because when homosexuality is no longer a crime, when every individual has human rights, then why the NHRC, which is supposed to be the body safeguarding rights, is silent on the human rights violations of lesbian, gay, bisexual people. Now, while we were speaking about some of the rights that are available, we must also talk about rights that are not available and that have been systematically, I would say, have been erased by some recent laws and amendments or court judgments. Marriage, of course, is something that you all know, you have heard discussed, because there was a case also about it, but also adoption, also surrogacy, also ART. Let me show you some evidences of this. So, of course, when it comes to marriage, we know that our marriage laws, they only speak about a biological man and woman. And we recently had the Supreme Court judgment saying that, sorry, we can't allow you guys to marry. When it comes to abortion, abortion in the MTP Act was only for women. But we had a judgment a year back which said that all people, including trans people, can go for MTP. Then when it comes to surrogacy, surrogacy was not regulated legally in India, but the Surrogacy Act came. And now the Surrogacy Act says that only legally married Indian man and woman are eligible to commission a surrogacy. Which means that queer people, trans people who are not married, etc., or single queer people cannot opt for surrogacy legally. When it comes to assisted reproductive technologies like IVF or freezing your gametes, etc., again, the commissioning couple has to be an infertile married couple. Which means then that queer people who are single or whose union is not recognized cannot avail of even ART procedures. When it comes to adoption, we know that the CARA guidelines talk about a married couple adopting. They also talk about single people adopting. But when it comes to a couple adopting, that is something that is not allowed. And this was also in the Supreme Court's recent judgment, which said that same-sex couples do not have the right to joint adoption. They can, of course, adopt as a single parent, but then we know that generally their applications are rejected under these guidelines. And this is something that comes as a shock to a lot of people, that not everyone has the right to donate blood. And when it comes to trans people or men having sex with men, they are permanently deferred from donating blood under the blood donation guidelines by National AIDS Control Organization. Because it says that these are the people who are at a higher risk of HIV, they can give HIV to other people, and therefore everyone from the trans community, irrespective of whether they have sex or not, irrespective of whether they are at a higher risk of HIV or not, wouldn't be allowed to donate blood. There is a court case which is still going on this. This is just a table to show, some of the rights that a lot of heterosexual couple have, but that a gay couple won't have. And while we know about marriage but even live-in is not recognized when it comes to homosexual couples. Of course, adoption, we don't have rights, surrogacy, ART. Under the Domestic Violence Act also, they can't go and appeal, nor for dowry. When it comes to pension, insurance, inheritance, or even right to take medical decisions for your partner, those rights, which a heterosexual couple does not have to even think about the other people, queer people, or and these are not only about couples, it's also about chosen family members. They are denied these rights. So this is, of course, the marriage equality case that appeared before the Supreme Court, and certain judgments were made that there's no fundamental right to marry, and that the marriage between queer people cannot be read into the Special Marriage Act or the Hindu Marriage Act. And however, it said that trans people who are in heterosexual relationships, that means their gender legal identities are different. Or like, for example, a male trans person and a female trans person, or a cis male and a female trans person can, of course, have a right to marry. And it also said that they do not even have a right to civil union, if not full marriage, and they can't even adopt. There's, of course, a challenge that is also going to happen to this. Now, I want to kind of conclude on this important note, something which is very touching. Yesterday, I met Aarti Malhotra. Aarti Malhotra is the mother of Arve Malhotra. Arve Malhotra was a 15-year-old student from DPS Hyderabad. That's the picture of Aarti and Arve. Arve was a gay child who was effeminate and was teased and bullied since childhood for their effeminate behavior. They were even sexually abused in the school by their classmates. And in spite of repeated complaints to the school administration, no action could be taken. And finally, Arve decided to end their life. Then we also have very recently the case of Pranshu, who was a teenager, 16-year-old from Ujjain, who decided to end their life because they were severely trolled on Instagram for what people call cross-dressing and for simply using makeup on their Diwali reel. They were both below 18 years of age, one 15-year-old, one 16-year-old, who had loving mothers, but that support wasn't enough. And the abuse, trolling, whether it was online or whether it was in the school, was so severe, was so traumatizing that both these kids decided to end their lives. And these are just two examples. There are numerous others whose stories probably we'll never even get to hear because their parents wouldn't want their identities to be known. But then fortunately, Aarti has been fighting the case of her child, and justice is not yet done. And this is where I want to bring to you the lacunae in the law. While the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act says that if someone is discriminated against or on the basis of their transness, then there can be punishment. But then there's no law to punish homophobia. If someone is being discriminated on the basis of their sexual orientation or teased, bullied, dragged for that, there's no law for that. There's no law on bullying for anyone in India. While we have laws for ragging, or we've not really laws, but I would say some guidelines or some kind of prohibition for ragging. When it comes to bullying in schools, no one is held responsible. And these were two stories of how children have died. So when we are speaking about human rights of LGBTQIA plus people, we need to understand that they can be also children. They can also be school-going children who can be bullied because of their sexual orientation and whose lives may never see adulthood. We speak about marriage, equality, and all those things. But here we are struggling for something very basic like surviving and enjoying the childhood, which is every child's right. On this note, I would end and conclude and would ask everyone to reflect on really do we have human rights for everyone, and to also look at the challenges ahead of us and what we can do individually and collectively to ensure that everyone has a beautiful and an equal life. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was such an insightful and enlightening session. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Now we will be taking I would request Professor Vibhuti ma'am for her remarks. Sorry, ma'am, you're on mute.
Yeah, Dr. Aqsa Shaikh, you took us through a whole journey of the human rights violation of trans people, though we have international covenant and some national laws and directives are there, but still actual reality is such that there are tremendous human misery. I would also like to add that even at the workplace, the cross-dressers and transgender persons, if they are equally competent, they have same qualification, but the bullying by the bosses also have resulted in a young persons losing their lives, no, because committed suicide. It happened in a corporate world also. And most important thing is that abandonment of the gender minorities by the torture by their own family members, biological family, that has now become a very important issue, which if you see the PUCL and so many NAS Foundation, several organizations have come together and come up with the in-depth case studies of the kind of torture. It is not only the community and the outsiders, but even their biological family does. And here comes the role of state. I think state has to take a proactive role, and currently we see it's only Kerala and Tamil Nadu who have done, to some extent Chhattisgarh, they have done in terms of a developmental investment and human development investment, which is done. So I think we have a major challenge in front of us wherever we are, whether we are in administration or academia or governance or political field. We all need to see to it that we actually make a gender inclusive way of organizing human lives. Thank you, Dr. Aqsa Shaikh, for sensitizing us. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. The floor is open for questions. Participants may ask if there are any. All right, seeing none, we can move on with the next session. So now we have Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, who will be taking a legal hands-on session 3 on human rights. Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam is the Fellowship Lead Advisor and a visiting Senior Fellow at IMPRI. Welcome, ma'am, and over to you.
Yeah, good evening. It's a wonderful presentation. Both of the presentations are like, so comprehensive that they have given, a lot of thoughts and insights. So, but I'll share something very different kind of thing today. So this is something what Vibhuti ma'am was talking about.
You can go full screen, shall it go?
Yeah, sure. So this is something Vibhuti ma'am was talking about in her initial remark. So this is the picture, but I just want to add that beside Hansa Mehta, there were two other women also, Lakshmi Menon and Begum Shaista Ikramullah from Pakistan, and there are other women who participated in making of Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So today I'll talk about human rights and how the poor and the unprivileged people are being treated, and what are their rights. And I'll start with this poem, Santhal song, and it says, a long time ago in the True Age, there were many creepers in the forest. A breeze brought rain from the sky in the right time. We made our long way short. We built roads after clearing the jungle. We built cities and markets. As the forest was gone, the rain stopped. We used to eat a ball of rice. Now we are sharing only a fistful. Even two real brothers do not get along. Daily they fight. So this is about how the land is being taken and the roads are being built, and the impact of development on the rights of people who are living in forest. So we are aware of how various leaders, they have said that no citizen should be so very rich that he can buy another, and none so poor that he could be compelled to sell himself. But then this is what is going on, and we have even in India we have leaders who talk about importance of social and economic rights, and the first prime minister, the prime minister, former prime minister, he said that poverty and unemployment are our biggest enemies. So if we talk about poverty and unemployment, we know SDG 1 talks about no poverty, and but still we have people who are living at less than $1.90 per day. And if you see, more women are living in poverty situation as compared to men. And if you talk about the numbers, 647 million people are still living in extreme poverty, and 27.5% of population is facing multidimensional poverty. So we know about the data about literacy and all other kinds of stunting. And so this is the website of World Food Program, and it says that in India, 21% of people are living less than US dollar 1.90 per day, and 1/4 of the world's undernourished people live in India. This is about global hunger index. India has ranked 111 out of 121 countries in 2023, and this is the ranking since 2009, and this is how we have we are performing in the global hunger index. If we talk about the UNDP report, which came recently in 2024, the Asia Pacific Human Development Report, Making Our Future, that is new direction for human development in Asia, and it talks about persistent wealth divide, which is driven by various factors such as globalization and technological advances. So this report says that women are only 23% of labor force, and before the pandemic, only 30 to 40% of regular salaried adult earners, they have job contracts or social securities, such as National Pension Scheme, Provident Fund, or health insurance. But this has gone down after pandemic. And for self-employed workers, the situation is more critical, and they constitute nearly 60% of labor force in 2019. The Oxfam came out with its report, and it's titled Survival of the Richest. And it says that in India, 5% own more than 60% of country's wealth. And it says that Indian billionaires, if they are taxed once at 2% of their entire wealth, it would support the requirement of 40,423 crores rupees, and it could help in dealing with the situation of malnourishment in the country for 3 years. Between 2012 and 2021, 40% of wealth created in India has gone to just 1% of population, and only a mere 3% of wealth has gone to the bottom 50% of population. And we have added more number of billionaires in India. In 2020, it was 102, and in 2022, it has gone up to 166. So the combined wealth of India, 100 richest, it has touched to $660 billion, and this could be, amount which could fund the entire union budget for more than 18 months. So this is how the income inequality is persisting in India. So the report further says that number of hungry Indians simultaneously increased to 350 million in 2022 from 190 million in 2018. So on the one hand, when the wealth is increasing for top few people, simultaneously the hunger increased among the bottom layer of the population. So this widespread hunger is resulting in 65% of the death among children under age of 5 in 2022. So Oxfam report says that India has world's highest number of poor that is 228.9 million. So it says that the bottom 50% of the population, it pays 6 times more indirect taxes, and indirect taxes in terms of the all kind of taxes we pay on food and non-food items. So the report says that the failure of the state to tax the rich people and corporation is resulting in inequality, and heavy reliance is made on consumption taxes like VAT, which is increasing inequality. So one of the questions that is being raised is that why India is not taxing the rich. So there is another study which is conducted by Public Health Foundation of India in 2023. It says that around 10% of Indians have experienced food insecurity, ranging from mild to moderate and severe categories. This study is conducted among 9,000 adults living in Sonipat and Vizag in Andhra Pradesh, and it talks about dietary intake during October 2018 and February 2019. And one of the key findings is that the food insecurity is gendered, and women reported high food insecurity as compared to men. So the study found that women, especially from the rural areas, they have low consumption of nutrient-rich foods such as dairy, vegetables, and other kind of vitamins, which are essential and necessary for the body. So why this is being done is because women tend to prioritize food for their male members and children, and the study suggests that a lot of food is wasted during transportation from farm to plate. So we all are aware of the case which is filed by PUCL, that is during 1990s, when people were starving and a lot of food was rotting in the godowns of Food Corporation of India, so the PUCL filed public interest litigation before the Supreme Court, and it says that right to food is violated. It's under Article 21 of the Constitution, which talks about right to life with human dignity. So that is being violated, and the Supreme Court in various of the orders, it has given various decisions, interim orders, which talks about employment assurance schemes. It talks about midday meal schemes, integrated child development schemes, and this case went on for quite a long time. So a lot of the details are available on the internet, and the primary focus is laid on PDS, that is public distribution system, and it says that that should be monitored. And then the Right to Food campaign was initiated, and the civil society, the people, the organizations, they raised this slogan, "Bhooke Pet Bhare Godam," that is starving bellies and godowns are full. So a National Food Security Act in 2013 was enacted, and this law talks about midday meal schemes, integrated child development schemes, and public distribution system. And Professor Bakshi, he has commented that it's a kind of a new sense of politics that is broadly a constitutional politics that is being seen while this act was enacted. But there are also gaps and challenges, and the scholars argue that the language of the rights should be drawn on, and of course PDS has a long history of implementation in India, starting from the late colonial period, but it's because of corruption and other things, it is not being properly implemented. So that should be monitored constantly. And of course we have now digital availability of data, but the scholars claim that because it is linked to Aadhaar, so many citizens are being denied benefit. And we have seen several of the cases where the people could not get their ration because of their digital identity could not be matched, or there could be other technical problems. So access to ration is denied in household where ration card was not linked to Aadhaar, and So, a lot of problems were there. And those who worked on the ground, the NGOs, they've also said that certain protein-rich diet from diverse sources is also lacking. So, they have been demanding for to add legumes, eggs, meat, milk, and fish in the midday meal schemes and all kind of other schemes. So, if we talk about at the international level, there is a report which is by special rapporteur on right to food placed before the United Nations, and it talks about lowering the food price and paying attention to range of diverse food, and it also talks about sustainable diets, and it says that since women are the principal caregivers, so they should be enabled to make informed and autonomous decisions about food and feeding the younger children. So so the adoption of human right framework should be done. But what we have done is we have adopted the market-based policies. So market-based, this is ad from the Western countries, but there they have food stamps. But here we don't even have those food stamps kind of thing. So this market-based policy, it shows that how market-based policies are resulting in inequalities in terms of income and availability of resources worldwide. So what are the solutions to poverty, inequality, and starvation? In India, we have the welfare state, we have fundamental rights and directive principles of state policies, which talks about various provisions, right to health and right to life, right to education, all kinds of rights are there. The only thing is about the implementation of those rights. And obviously we have made several laws over the years, right to food, then right to employment, we have the law, we have a Right to Education Act in 2009. So we have enacted laws, but the thing is that we need to implement those laws. So what we have learned is that human rights do not exist in vacuum. We have law, morality, culture, and society, which are intertwined and related in multiple and complex ways. We have to talk about accountability of the state, because when the state has failed at the moral level while denying justice, so what should be done in that situation? The actual realization of rights remains flawed, and we have seen the struggle which is being done on the street and at the Supreme Court level. So we have to look at the complexities, and we have to expand the idea of citizenship and towards deepening democracy. So here I'm trying to raise certain questions. That Constitution of India define, it says that India is a welfare state. So how the decisions to allocate resources are being taken by the government? What are the duties of state vis-a-vis citizens, especially those who are at the margins? Why claiming citizenship entitlement is difficult for some people? We have seen, like during the previous presentations, these questions have been raised that certain citizens are being denied certain rights when we have this provision of equality within the Constitution. So state has resources, powers, and capabilities to create appropriate conditions, but still we have poverty, we still have starving people, we still have destitute people, and agency is denied to oppressed people. So why some people are forced to face these kind of unjust situations? So why the right to food or the right to shelter or health is not declared as fundamental rights in the Indian Constitution? Because still, right to health, we have seen during the COVID that a lot of people suffered. So we have, of course, the courts in India, they have interpreted those rights under Article 21. But we could have, as kind of separate rights which could be defined, and especially it could be given in the fundamental rights, because right now we have a lot of civil and political rights under the Chapter 3 and social and economic rights under Chapter 4. So we have seen right to education being, now seen as fundamental rights. So we have to talk about other rights too. So we are debating on freebies and there is a whole debate which is going on among the political parties. But we are not talking about Human Development Index, the situation of poverty, the situation of starvation, and other kind of inequalities. So we have people who are, they're struggling. They are, during the previous sessions, we have seen how even the Adivasis, the Dalits, the Asha workers, the Anganwadi workers, they are raising their voices. But we have to take a stand that when these people will get their rights. So with this, I'll just end my presentation, and just this note that overcoming poverty is not a task of charity, it is an act of justice. So I'll just stop here, and maybe we can take questions.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. It was an enlightening and a very instructive session on human rights. Thank you so much, ma'am. Now I request the chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel, to share her remarks.
Yeah, I think Dr. Shalu Nigam, you have given a complete profile of what all entails in the human rights, and it is a dignity of life is very important. At the same time, social, economic, political rights of the people and states' accountability. What you have emphasized most is the state accountability of the state, and we need to demand that. And the PUCL, the public interest litigation by PUCL on right to food also snowballed into right to education, right to freedom, right to justice. And I think this whole right-based perspective with which social movement has functioned right from the 80s, where Olga Tallis's petition on right of payment dwellers to have a secure housing. And I think all three of you have complemented each other. Vahida started with the discussion on right from the Second World War, and how we shifted from the whole paradigm shift from growth to development, and now human development happened. Dr. Aqsa also highlighted the question of gender minorities and their brutalization, dehumanization, and what kind of global and national instruments we have, and their inadequacies also she showed with so many case studies. And I think yours was made it very complete. The complete that justice, there can't be freedom without justice. There can't be peace without justice. So I think it's very important that on this 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we become not only aware of the situation, but we also take a pledge to act to whatever we have grasped through these sessions. Thank you. There is a question.
Right, thank you, ma'am. The floor is open for questions. Participants may ask if there are any. Yes, Sparsh Chaudhary. You may unmute, ma'am.
Sparsh has only commented that it's a beautiful, enlightening session. Thank you.
Ma'am, she had raised her hand.
Raised question also? Okay. Yeah. Sparsh, are you there?
No, ma'am. I just wanted to thank basically like all of the sessions, because the cause of human rights, like मेरे दिमाग में होता था कि मुझे इसे और पढ़ना है, but I never thought on these lines, no, the challenges, the first session we have discussed, कि ये challenges हैं. That's why we are still fighting this cause. And the LGBTQ में तो like I have learned studied sociology, so I never thought कि हम इतने dimensions में सोच सकते हैं. So today's session was like mind blowing. Thank you so much.
All of them were mind blowing. Yeah, all three of them.
Yeah, all three of them. Yeah.
So complemented each other and gave us a holistic for the
Yes.
actual like UDHR, universal perspective we got on UDHR.
And
I
on,
think
I mean,
that's what I
today-
also guessed. I said, otherwise, the participants are so vociferous and today they are not speaking. I think all of them are absorbing so many new insights, perspectives, and information that they have got today from our resource person. It was really, and good that it is also on YouTube. So we will have a larger this in participation and audience and responses. Yes, thank you. So Sparsh, what are you working on? Acha, you are.
Yeah, I am working. I just joined as an Indira Fellow by Indian National Congress Party. So we have been allotted a constituency. It's my home constituency. So I'll be working to at the grassroots to make. आपने देखा है लाडली बहना had just changed MPs electoral outcomes. So it's very easy to mold women कि आखिरी 5-6 महीनों में आप cash for vote दे दो without changing things at the ground. It's been told by one of my colleagues that 60% of the schemes, 50% of the schemes for women actually reach them, but Ladli Behna reached 95%, all because of the electoral reason. But this is not the way out, right? Issues are like when we talk about economic independence, सबसे basic चीज है dignity के लिए, हम उसकी बात नहीं करते, हम education की बात नहीं करते. तो I don't know, मेरी journey, especially I am in a place जहाँ Indian National Congress is struggling. I'm not saying that a particular ideology is foolproof, but the basic, the core or the clash of the ideology we are seeing in the country is on these lines, right? Hindu Rashtra versus something else, democratic state. But in सारी चीजों में हम जो लड़ाई लड़ रहे हैं इस फेलोशिप में, वो ये है कि women have been betrayed by all political parties everywhere. Nobody gives them ticket, nobody gives them mic. In my 1 month electoral experience, ma'am, एक लड़ाई होती है एक टीवी बाइट लेने के लिए मेरा द टीवी पैनल कम्स एंड आपको माइक छीनना पड़ता है, आपको कोई सुने. एंड इसमें भी अगर आप बहुत ज्यादा वोसिफरस स्पीकर हो, बहुत ज्यादा आउटस्पोकन हो, तो और आप सबड्यूड हो जाते हो, लाइक वी आर सीइंग इन द पार्लियामेंट आल्सो. तो ये एक लड़ाई है. वी हैव बीन टोल्ड दैट
अभी भी ज्यादातर पॉलिटिशियन तो मानते ही है ना, women are to be seen, not to be heard.
Yes, I mean, आप उन्हें वोट के लिए यूटिलाइज कर रहे हो,
क्राउड में आ जाइए,
giving them positions of decision making.
Yeah.
So I don't know how I'll do it, but yeah, I'm loving whatever work we have started. So yeah.
So your dissertation will also be on the same subject?
No. I just told you that's a different thing. Asha workers, because I have started meeting them also for my work.
Yeah.
So I was thinking कि कुछ नया निकल के आए, मेरा काम तो बहुत आगे चलेगा, but ये थोड़ा है वो होगा.
श्वेता, मैंने मकाम का रिपोर्ट आज शेयर किया है ईमेल पे, वो उनको फॉरवर्ड कर देंगे स्पर्श जी को.
Yeah, please.
Makam's report is about the ASHA workers, what happened to ASHA workers during the pandemic in the rural areas.
And I googled about Jasodhara ma'am's work. So एक या दो research paper I have gone through.
Or memorandum of ASHA workers, memorandum of Anganwadi workers during the pandemic.
Okay. I'll search it.
वो लोगों ने मुझे मेमोरेंडम दिया ना, वो भी इंटरनेट पे है. आप फेमिनिस्ट पॉलिसी कलेक्टिव वो वेबसाइट पे जाइए.
Okay.
फेमिनिस्ट पॉलिसी कलेक्टिव की वेबसाइट.
I mean, Shweta, if Shweta can just remind me, like I'll.
या और वो मक्काम रिपोर्ट तो आप फॉरवर्ड कर दीजिए. मैंने ईमेल पे डाला है क्योंकि मेरे पास आपका ईमेल आईडी नहीं था, तो मैंने लर्निंग इम्प्री पे डाला है.
Yeah, I'll contact her. Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. I mean, this fellowship I had done also earlier, also human rights and gender, but this thing, although मतलब ये weekends पे हो रहा है, we wait for it very curiously. अभी क्या होगा? So thank you so much.
हम भी काफी बहुत तैयारी करते हैं. हमारी ओर से भी होमवर्क उतना ही होता है जितना आप लोग करते हैं.
Yeah, sure.
Commitment. We are doing it for the commitment, no, like a mission. Yes. Very.
Yeah.
और सर जी, आप जशोधरा मैम को कांटेक्ट करेंगे ना, हमारा इम्प्री का नाम बताएंगे तो वो हेल्प करेंगे. जशोधरा दास गुप्ता जी ना.
So how I'll contact her.
काम उन्होंने किया. आरती स्वाहानी,
कर लीजिए.
वो भी डॉक्टर हैं. She is the leader of Anganwadi. She unionized the Anganwadi workers.
Okay.
Dr. Aarti Swahani and Dr. Jashodhara Das Gupta, they are working on with Anganwadi workers as well as ASHA workers. और उनकी बदौलत WHR का जो अवार्ड मिला बेस्ट कोरोना वॉरियर्स का, वो भी उसके
Okay.
लिए उन्होंने जो कुछ राइटिंग किए और
Yeah.
लैंडसेट में और इंटरनेशनल मेडिकल जर्नल्स में उसके बारे में बहुत कुछ लिखा, तब जाके ये बहनों का काम विजिबलाइज हुआ।
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so
पर
much.
एज ए रिसर्चर आप रीच आउट करिए, प्रोफेसर पटेल का नाम ले लीजिए, इम्प्री का, वो सब जानते हैं, वो आपको हेल्प करेंगे।
तो
How would
feminist
I
policy
how
collective
would
में
I
मैं हूँ।
contact her? How would I reach
ईमेल
out?
ईमेल ईमेल खोज लेंगे, मिल जाएगा आपको, सब मिल जाएगा।
Okay,
हाँ।
either LinkedIn पे if it's feasible.
है ना, शी इज ऑन लिंक्डइन ऑल्सो
Okay.
एंड
Okay.
ये भी, और उनका फेमिनिस्ट पॉलिसी कलेक्टिव का वेबसाइट भी वेरी
Website
एक्टिव
पे भी
वेबसाइट है,
correct.
उसमें सब
पर
भी
ईमेल करिए ना, वो फॉर्मल होता है, ईमेल
हाँ
कीजिए,
ईमेल कर दीजिए।
अच्छा
Okay. Okay. Sure. 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 Yeah.
हाँ,
Thank you so much.
बस।
Are there any more questions on the floor?
I think आज का बहुत ही ये रहा ना, lot of food for thought we got from all three
Yes.
lectures. So I think people are still like mulling over the whatever has been
Yes.
imparted, no? I think they are okay. और चैट पे दूसरा कुछ भी तो नहीं। Can I also have it mailed to me? या भारती अग्रवाल जी, या मैंने जो आज भेजे हैं ना, काफी सारे डॉक्यूमेंट्स भेजे हैं, काफी जो हैवी थे वो गूगल ड्राइव में है, और दूसरे हैं तो ये तो अकॉर्डिंग टू द टॉपिक यू कैन डिस्कस। जिनके जेंडर बेस्ड वायलेंस पे या तो ये सब थे, वो सब भी वाले डॉक्यूमेंट मैंने आज ईमेल किए, तो वो उनको जिनको भी चाहिए उनको कर दीजिए।
All right. Seeing no more
हम
questions.
रीडिंग लिस्ट में ही सारा ऐड करवा देंगे, आपने
हाँ
जो
बस वही कर देता हूँ तो उनको
सब-
बहुत अच्छा हो
सब
जाएगा।
सबको ऐड कर देंगे। आस्थाबा, या गो अहेड, आस्थाबा, यू आर रेजिंग हैंड।
Yes, sir. My question is not particularly to any speaker today. तीनों topics about basic human rights, LGBTQI plus, and hunger, they are very strong topics and very much serious for the society right now, global sense में और Indian sense में भी. But ये academic spaces के बाहर I don't see any conversation happening. I see my parents watching the TV. We see the global Israel, Gaza, what that's happening. And we see constantly that even people from there, their basic human rights are not even considered as human anymore. And we've seen that coming from the first world nations, the world nations that call themselves developed in every sense that possible, but even on the global stage, no conversation as such is happening. So any comments that you would have about that?
That's why our responsibility increases, no? Because the media is controlled, so many mergers. There is a complete monopoly of the super rich media, no? Billionaires are controlling the media. So that is why our efforts have to multiply, replicate, and we need to be the voice of those whose voices have been strangulated and who are in the pain of Palestinian or pain of anybody who is invisibilized. We need to do it. So that's what I think. It's the only participation from below and the people's participation that is going to create this. Because I know whether you see the WhatsApp group or social media or even your neighbor, people in the colony or relatives, all of them are only absorbing and repeating and relaying the same kind of very, very insensitive neoliberal majoritarian views. And I think Israel is a classic example where pain of completely like more thousands of children and even women, when you have, it is a post-truth reality. You have documentary evidences, you have videos, newspapers are at least publishing what is happening to them, but nobody is controlling this thing. Israel also has a temerity to tell that the UN General Secretary should be ousted. Imagine, how do they get this kind of a person, popularly elected person from 192 countries? One nation can say that he needs to be ousted just because he says that he talks about ceasefire. No? So I think we are in a very, very problematic situation. We are in a very difficult political reality. I think it is the jingoism which was there in a pre-World War, First World War and Second World War. We have heard from our grandparents. I think the same kind of history is being repeated, and that's why our duty increases. We need to, what Dr. Shalu Nigam told us about the accountability of the nation state. I think we need to have this kind of accountability, and all citizens of the world will have to do. We did that during Vietnam War, no? When a tiny little country was being bombarded by America. And it was the students and youth who started, and finally it got wildfire everywhere from the world over. There was a common voice that no more Vietnam, no more bombing of the small nation. And finally, America had to withdraw in 1975. When the mothers came out, that you have converted our innocent young boys into demons. They have been completely brutal. Every war brutalizes. So I think, yeah, we need to keep the discourse on, and we need to publicly debate these issues. Though it is uncomfortable, and so many times we get ostracized, we have to face isolation, intellectual isolation, political isolation. Our own people throw us out for of the political stand that we take. But I think we have to do it.
Yeah, we have to see our history also. Like, in our history, if you see, the emergency was imposed, and how people have come up, the common people like you and me, and so many people, they have come up and raised their voice. So similarly, for every, I think, such kind of situation, we as people, we have to raise our voice, because of course the powerful really, they buy media, they stop printing presses. Like at that time, the printing press has been stopped and people have been jailed and all. So I think we have to take a stand, and we have to do something as common citizens.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Very rewarding session. Today's day was really, we commemorated International Human Rights Day in a most appropriate way by bringing in all aspects of human rights through our 3 sessions.
Yes, Ms.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Just making sure if I'm audible.
yeah, please.
Yes.
Yeah. So before I ask my questions, I want to honestly share this, because while all the sessions were going on, there were so many questions which were popping out in my head. But soon after the question popped in my head, it was answered by the next slide. And it was so amazing to, be a part of this fellowship where it has actually answered so many questions, which we wouldn't even think of it on a day-to-day life. This wouldn't come to our head to think about LGBTQIA and a whole spectrum of UDHRC. And this was a great opportunity to learn. And coming to my questions, my first question is not a general question, because this was specifically asked by the UPSC. And also, this was a case study which had taken place recently. So there was this, coming to the poverty issue and hunger issue, there was a case where an IAS officer was reached by a 90-year-old woman. She did not apparently carry any PDS form or even, any documentations which is required to obtain PDS. And the IAS officer, yes, there is, if this question would have been asked to any layman, they would say that just provide the food, which is actually kept for such use. But you cannot, as an IAS officer or even a district, a CEO, you cannot do that, and you still have to wait, or you can, take some measures just to provide, those documentation. But meanwhile, this process takes place. The person who has reached the 90-year-old woman, she died, unfortunately. And she was not provided food, as even, to call it as a first aid. But then they could have made certain arrangements, like, admitting her to the hospital, putting her on some, medication so she can sustain to the life. So this was a very heartbreaking case which we had to see. And although there can be, some legal measures which can be taken, but my question is, how do we sensitize some civil societies? How do we sensitize citizen around, such issues? There is some amount of awareness that should be spread to the public, to be empathetic to anybody. And this has been a challenge for most of the administrators who are being selected year after year, after such extravagant interviews and the process. Although we have a paper for ethics separately in our, syllabus, this question is still unanswered. Nobody has given a proper answer for such questions till now. I like all the speakers, to share their input so that we are enlightened about this issue. Thank you, ma'am.
Saying that IAS officer could not have given her PDS is unacceptable. I do the budget analysis, and there are so much unassigned grant also, where you use your discretion. It's a disaster management department, but it remains unutilized. We have so many other unutilized residual fund. You have a fund for floods, earthquake, tsunami, typhoon. All these things remain unused. And if you convince if that person is convinced that this is a real emergency, he could have used the fund from the disaster management. That lady died during the pandemic. So pandemic also we had a special fund. In fact, in Bombay, when the community kitchens for 12,000 Bhiwandi workers in Bhiwandi were started, people, the NGOs and the organizations, they asked from the commissioner even free of charge gas cylinder. They asked for tankers from municipal corporation to reach to that places so that the homeless people, they could bathe, where the camps were created. Or every ward had a war room. And in that war room, if you told the genuine problem that we need to lift the grain from FCI go down, they were allowed. In fact, those who were excluded, sex workers and transgender people were excluded because there was, in the directive, it was not written that they deserve to be fed. No? And then immediately when the NGOs and newspaper and local FM channels and all started speaking about it, they included it. So it's basically you're sensitive, how proactive you are as a bureaucrat. My papa was a bureaucrat. And so many things which were not written in the ONGC rule book, he did just using his good office. I have been a bureaucrat. I had so many administrative responsibilities when I was working in the university. So many things were not there in the statute, but still you use your wisdom, and you if you know that you have honesty of purpose, even the higher authorities, they don't, because had he embezzled the grain for himself, he would have been charged for corruption. But when everything happens there is transparency, there is a discussion, even the people at the lower level, if you convince them, then he could have avoided the human misery. In any case, India is known for food charity, not from now. For 3,000 years, all the rich people, they used to have open the ground. You go to Patna city, there is a big grain bank, and it used to be open at the time of drought. So we are not in Los Angeles, where just you steal, quote unquote, steal. I don't think stealing of food can't be stolen. Food has to be eaten. But they say that person has stolen one loaf of bread and that person is in jail for. We are not that kind of. Culturally also, food charity has been part of it, Like you see MGR, or not from Chennai, superstar of Tamil Nadu. He was MGR, yes. He, as a child, it was some neighbor who used to give him, it was extremely poor, he had no food. And one neighbor would give him a thick sambar and rice. The day he became chief minister in 1964, first thing he did was start midday meal. And we all have learned about midday meal from Tamil Nadu. He says, in my state, I don't want anyone to go hungry. So later on, it became Amma's kitchen. But when I have eaten that midday meal food in Arkonam, it is like any other homemade food. Nobody even asks you for Aadhaar or any identity. You just go and sit in this thing. They give you banana leaf in which they put rice and sambar with lots of vegetables. So old woman dying, under no circumstances it is justifiable. This bureaucratic argument is not acceptable. We are bureaucrat, but we are also human beings. If nothing else, like all of us, when we were during the pandemic, when we were going out, we were asking for watchmen. Aapko kya chahiye? And along with ours, this thing, they called it curfew. So when the curfew was relaxed, we used to bring for it. I remember one neighbor of mine, she gave, because I was teaching online continuously, but one neighbor of mine, for nearly 1 year, she gave complete meal to the watchmen. who was from who could not go out because police were beating poor people left, right, and center. No, so I think this kind of humanity we have seen. This, even those who walk for 1,200 kilometers from this, they were saying that we have never seen this level of solidarity on the national highway. People standing with the biscuit, people standing with food packets. So many people even walk with the migrants. You read that report by ISI, Indian Social Institute, walking with the migrants. No, beautiful report. How the citizens were walking with them along with water and bread and food packets. And whenever they sat down, they also did the pep talk and all that. Okay, you don't have big houses, you don't have big colonies where you can accommodate, but that much solidarity. Or people, we were continuously flooded with the calls from the shoemaking company, Bata and all. How many slippers you want? These people, we saw the photographs, videos of these people. Their feet are bleeding. So can we provide them? You get a phone call from Parle industry that we want how many Bisleri bottles? Where should we send the truck? This level of solidarity, even its citizens did, no? So the person with such a big power of being a district commissioner, allowing an old woman to die of hunger, I just don't it's just not acceptable. It's just not.
Yes, ma'am. Although the bureaucrats are generally accountable for such actions, my question was again, citizens who are witnessing such heinous situations, I think they have to come up, and then there is certain, public support
Nothing
that
else, you
is
could have made
required.
one phone call, no, to some middle class person.
Yes, yes.
And here is
Of
this
course.
lady, can you just send a bus? That's what
Of
happened.
course.
It used to happen in a big way. In fact, Bombay, they used to have a relay. A lady in Virar is 40 kilometers away, and there is a person with a baby in Nepinsi Road. Citizens would make chain to reach the milk for the baby, and they would see to it that this lonely elderly is united with her family members, no? And because there were curfew, you could rickshaws and vehicles were not going from one end of the city to the other, no? So, but they did that. So, and along with the corporators, no? Corporators, elected representatives, so panchayat members of panchayat, this thing, administrators, and citizens, all three of them coordinated with each other and then reduce the human misery.
Yes, ma'am. And I would like to share one more instance. Recently, when I was traveling, I met with a transgender lady who was, she resorted that it's better to beg than to seek, the programs which are being designed for their betterment by the government. I asked her, I just took 2 minutes to ask her, why would you say that it's better, to beg? She said, I would earn more than this. I would, this is, we have a long way to go. Even just policy formulation, and it also has to be implemented in certain way that no beneficiary is, has a scope of ambiguity. No beneficiary has to think twice, reaching to such programs or reaching to such help from the government. So thank you, ma'am.
No, and even the word beneficiary has been protested. That if you see the UN Women, they said you can't call anybody beneficiary. Everybody pays indirect tax. Whether you are a beggar or a homeless person, even if you buy 1 cup of tea, you are paying indirect tax. That means you are a tax-paying citizen, because most of our tax structure is skewed in favor of the rich, no? So we are paying more indirect tax. So that is one, and they all are stakeholders. They are contributing in some way or the other, no, to the nation. Yeah, either as a consumer or as a producer. They are contributing, so that is also there. And I think when it comes to begging, because we have so many people, earlier they were beggars and now they are domestic workers in my building and all. So one thing with the, luckily for them, because of YWCA really worked with them, and they're basically, the employers are very compassionate and understanding, so it's okay. But otherwise in begging, there is an impersonal relationship, no? So you don't have to face that kind of degrading attitude, which the people when you are a recipient of the program, because those who manage the program, they also treat poor people very, very, in a very shabby way, no? continue.
Yes, ma'am. She also
The language
mentioned,
the language they
yes.
use, they make them really cringe. They make them go there repeatedly. Even we see
Yes,
the
ma'am.
separation. Yeah.
I did ask her these questions, and she said, I am used to, listening to such, bawdy words from people, and yet there is a lot of red tapeism, while when it is from the receiving end, we get to know a lot of perspectives that the person who is involved in such activity, they receive a lot of discrimination. So this was so thought-provoking when Shalu Nigam ma'am and also Aqsa Shaikh ma'am, she took these presentations, and I could not stop myself from asking such questions. So it was very insightful, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah.
All
And
the
we have
three
seen,
of
I
the
think you should
speakers.
read the book by Ghanshyam Shah on plague.
Okay.
How commissioner of the city, Surat city, he controlled the plague, and how compassionate he was with the migrant workers, because they had to evacuate the city, no? And 50 to 55% workers in Surat city are migrant. They are from 16 states in India. And how humanly he executed this whole emergency. He was also punishing the rich. He said that if I see any dirt in this thing, he'll be fined. So he used a monetary ways, because Surat was the dirtiest city of Gujarat, and now it is the cleanest city. And people would just, when he left, everybody was crying. No, they loved him so much because of his compassion. He used his power for justice and dignity of the people who were in crisis of plague. Mr. Rao, he was later on transferred to some other state. IS Kadam.
Yes, ma'am. I'll definitely
Plague
study
by
upon.
OUP publication, Oxford University publication. Ghanshyam Shah.
Okay.
Yes, written.
Ghanshyam Shah. Yes, ma'am. Certainly. I shall look at it. Thank you.
There's just one thing I'd just like to add for the awareness and sensitization when you're talking about as a person working on legal literacy. I'll just share an incident of 10-15 years back. And I went to like for the training programs. We will conduct Indian Social Institute was conducting a training program, and we call a bureaucrat to address the gathering. And then he said, why you are making people aware of the rights? Because once you make people aware of the rights, they will come to the courts, and our courts will be filled. So, like, is this a solution for the justice? Like,
no, and they also blame us, no, women's movement. They said, because of your legal literacy program, earlier these women, they were so scared to even enter our campus, and they would always have their eyes lowered, and they would say, "My bab, bhai bab." And now they just bang the door open. They don't even seek permission. They bypass our watchmen who guard and the gatekeepers. And in group, they come and they start just howling at us. This is what I have heard while doing my gender budget training in Rajasthan, in Haryana, in UP also. Yes, I can say that. So this is what they said. You people are making them confident that now they think that they are equal. And the bureaucrats also say, like what Jan Mardal had written in his book, Asian Drama, that equality of relation is possible among equals. So these fellows, they think they are not equal. They are the brown sahibs, no? And who are these women from the poverty group who come and just demand that this is what are my rights? We know that in our workshop, we were told that these are the programs and we deserve to get the benefits of it. Yeah, right. Yeah, major challenges, multi-pronged challenges. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. I request Professor Vibhuti Patel to give her closing remarks for the session.
Yeah, I think I join all of you in saying that today's sessions were really mind-blowing. And what we have seen that over the past few years, international organizations and the nation states have increasingly turned attention to how trends such as technological change, demographic change, accelerated globalization, environmental degradation, climate change have impacted human rights challenges. And they were exhaustively discussed in Dr. Vahida and Nainar's presentation. Dr. Aqsa Sheikh's presentation made us aware of discrimination and violence against people in the LGBTQI LPPYF community, which are so normalized. Homophobic, biphobic, and transphobic attitudes remain deeply embedded in our cultures around the world. She also told about the global instruments. She also said some of the landmark events in India. She also showed the limitations of some of the legal provisions and the directives in our country, whether they are through legislative route or through judicial route. And there has been limited analysis on these mind-boggling challenges, which present significant challenges to the opportunities for the human rights of the gender minorities. So transforming the current development model to one that realizes human rights through redistribution of power and resources is essential to the realizing this vision. And what we have seen that in a post-pandemic period, there have been significant implications for the existential struggles of the gender minorities and women. Globally, women make up 70% of frontline workers in health and even social sector on a wide range of occupations. At the same time, they also bear disproportionate responsibility of care of children, elderly, people with disabilities. And the pandemic triggered insecurities has further intensified and increased level of structural and systemic violence, interpersonal violence in the domestic and the public arena. So the question of unpaid care work, domestic workload. Today you must have read the horrifying news of how 14-year-old domestic worker was brutalized by their employers in Gurgaon. That is a very, very horrifying story that has appeared. So this is also happening, and this story has appeared on the International Human Rights Day. Erosion of livelihood and economic security is also major challenge which results in violation of human rights. Intersectional vulnerabilities have increased for indigenous and gender minorities, and enabling economic, social, political framework for the human rights would center on realization of human rights by changing the macroeconomic policies, prioritizing equitable distribution over wealth accumulation, facilitating the investments in public services and infrastructure, increasing pension and social security, raising minimum wages, and instead of providing tax cuts for corporations and the wealthy. Dr. Shalu Nigam also quoted the report, Oxfam report on income inequality in our country. We need to combat the proliferation of insecure informal work by offering incentives to business to spark economic growth, to generate work with decent wages and conditions. Reimagining economy of which respects human rights would involve like adequately recognizing and prioritizing the specific needs of specific populations, ensuring reproductive autonomy, eliminating all discriminations, and valuing and investing in care work, both paid and unpaid. And also like such investment can both stimulate employment for all, and also much needed physical and social infrastructure that benefits everybody. Our efforts have to be to create a global consensus for social inclusion of the marginalized sections into the mainstream. UN has today declared the pledge, and I quote, I will respect your rights regardless of who you are. I will uphold your rights even when I disagree with you. When anyone's human rights are denied, everyone's rights are undermined. So I'll stand up, I'll raise my voice. I think this is the spirit with which all of us will have to work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. With the chair's permission, we can go for vote of thanks.
Please go ahead.
So as we come to the end of day 4 of Law and Public Policy Youth Fellowship 2.0 Cohort, an online National Winter School program, a 1-month immersive online law and public policy awareness certificate training course and internship program, Ashwita Shankar, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI, New Delhi. We are grateful to our experts for the Day 4 session, Professor Vibhuti Patel, Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, and Dr. Aqsa Shaikh, and Dr. Vahida Nainar for taking out their valuable time and giving us an opportunity to learn from this online certificate program. We thank our chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel, and lead advisor, Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, for convening the session. We thank all of our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. We look forward to welcoming you coming Saturday that is December 16 at 6 p.m. for our day 5 of this certification course by distinguished experts, Ms. Elsa Marie De Silva and Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam. We are grateful if you're watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in future to our IMPRI #WebPolicyLearning and #WebPolicyTalk. Wishing you a good day. Thank you.